and welcome to a new edition of Planet Waves TV. My name is Eric Francis Coppolino, the host of Planet Waves FM on the Pacifica Network and the author of the Planet Waves horoscope. And all that can be found on planetwaves.net. Have a visit. It's a new, beautiful edition of Planet Waves, the best ever. So, very exciting week coming up. There has been no shortage of exciting weeks, though we are getting near the bottom of the barrel of 2020 astrology. Really, as far as I can figure, there are three major events that are left to unfold, and two of them happen this week. One of them happens on Thursday, which is the third conjunction of Jupiter, the largest planet, and Pluto, the smallest planet. And then about 24 hours later, a little bit more, is the station direct of Mars. Mars has been retrograde since September 9th. Mars is retrograde for a little over 2 months, maybe about 10 weeks every 2 years. So that's about, I guess, 9% of the time. So that's not, Mars retrograde in itself is not an unusual thing, but to have Mars retrograde in Aries is an unusual thing. The last time that happened was in 1988, before some of you were even born. And so 2020 has been an extraordinary year of things that only happen very rarely. For example, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction that took place on January 12th, the day that China sent out the fake codes to the polymerase chain reaction machine and started all this bullshit that we're in the middle of right now. That hasn't happened since 1982, right at the dawn of the Reagan administration, the dawn of the neoconservative era, which has now reached its apotheosis one Saturn-Pluto cycle later in 2020. So the Saturn-Pluto conjunction was on January 12th, and then the year is ended by another major conjunction. That is the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. That takes place on the winter solstice on 12/21. That conjunction has not happened since 2000. So we begin the year with the 38-year conjunction. We end the year with a 20-year conjunction in the same year, incredibly. And then along the way was a Venus retrograde and then a Mars retrograde. It's kind of like you get the feeling from the astrology that anything that could have happened in 2020 has happened in 2020. Astrologically, that unfortunately has translated to some very strange events in the world in which we live, though I would say events with which people are complicit by not really fully understanding or seeking an understanding of what's going on. I'll come back to that in the second half of this little program when I give my science homework report. In between the big conjunction in January and the big conjunction in December is a series of three conjunctions, one borrowing one planet in the first conjunction, the other borrowing one planet in the second conjunction. And so the three conjunctions that are taking place in April, June, and November are Jupiter and Pluto. So if you're following that, the year began with Saturn-Pluto, it ends with Jupiter-Saturn, and then in the middle, Jupiter and Pluto have done a little dance, forming a series of conjunctions in Capricorn. This is very characteristic of the times that we're living in, and I'll get to what the symbolism of that is in a moment. The first thing that we need to keep in mind is that through the second half of the year, Mars has been in Aries, and it is now finishing this retrograde in Aries. And as mentioned, there has not been a Mars retrograde in Aries since 1988. That is a heck of a long time ago, more than 32 years ago. So what you get with Mars retrograde is a lot of energy of Mars that is usually directed forward and outwardly. Mars tends to be an assertive, extroverted planet, is instead turned inward on itself and expressed inwardly in some way, and this can manifest as a review of Mars, a review of what you want. It can be an analysis of all the emotions, feelings, and phenomena associated with Mars, which include assertion, desire, sexual desire, anger, aggression, all turned inward, which can create frustration, guilt, resentment, and other material like that. And further, it can create a kind of an energy dam where it seems like there's just no way to really assert yourself in the way that you want, or your efforts are frustrated, or you encounter obstacles to getting what you want. There's been plenty of that in 2020. But the thing with Mars retrograde in Aries is it's very personal, and it represents self-concept as well as self. So Mars is the ruling planet of Aries, and as such, it is the planet that says I am, particularly in Aries. The thing is that Mars in Aries is never really quite so sure about who it is, and so there's often a question, or there's some insecurity, and when you turn Mars retrograde, there's going to be even more of a question and more insecurity, and what is generally a confidence problem. Now, our culture has a certain way of thinking about confidence, which is, it's the guy in the sharp-looking suit who walks in the front of the room, makes a presentation, and sells the whole room on something. Or, it's the bold hunter who can bring down an elephant, or it's the guy with the Porsche and the radar detector who can drive to California at 90 miles an hour and not get a speeding ticket, or all kinds of associations. Bond, James Bond. There's your kind of picture of confidence as presented in our culture. Personally, I think that confidence is a much more sublime and subtle thing. For example, the confidence to question your reality, the confidence to stand up to someone who is making an assertion. Mars can represent curiosity, and I would say that curiosity is a form of confidence. Curiosity is granting oneself the permission to experiment with seeking knowledge. You want to know something. If you are curious, you are more likely to seek out that knowledge than if you are not curious. In case you're wondering, my personality is driven mostly by curiosity. Almost all facets of my personality are driven by curiosity, including wow, how do you write a horoscope column, for example? I never wanted to write a horoscope column. I was just curious about how it might be done. In the style of Mars, my entire sexuality is driven by curiosity. My desire to investigate matters of an astrological or scientific nature is curiosity. I like to travel the world because I'm curious. Curiosity is a beautiful and friendly thing, and curiosity is a very important form of confidence. And so the message of this Mars retrograde is to connect with your curiosity, connect with your desire, seek to understand the things that frustrate you and make you angry. A very, very large portion of the world has as its main problem frustration. Frustration is a very serious problem. If you borrow from the human design system, frustration is one of the most powerful, vexing, and difficult to deal with expressions of what is called not self. And so frustration creates a lot of not selfness that really has a way of driving people nuts, and costing a lot of happiness and pleasure and joy in life. And we need to pay attention to this. Frustration is not a natural state at this stage of human evolution. It is not a necessary state at this stage in human evolution. And I would propose that anyone who has recognized this problem take the time to understand the sources of your frustration and address them. All of that said, Mars stationing direct may represent a release from some of that frustration, but this is predicated upon something that I consider very important, which is knowing what you want to do, having a sense of who you are, but also having a sense of who you want to be. These are things that would seem to require tremendous freedom of consciousness. And this is the freedom of consciousness that is, I think, a benefit of being present for your spiritual path. Okay, before we get to Mars stationing direct on Friday and that release point, that release of whatever energy and pent up desire and frustration and curiosity that this may release, and of course a little something different for everyone because there are 12 possible houses to have Mars in Aries in. And I, by the way, cover this in my horoscope column that either comes out or came out on Monday evening, the 9th, depending on when you're watching this video. Check the front page of planetwaves.net to find that. Before that happens, before that Mars direct happens, there's a conjunction of Jupiter and Pluto. Talked about that right at the beginning. I want to show you a little bit about what this looks like in an astrological representation. Currently, let's just add one extra planet that's hanging out there. Pallas Athene, an important asteroid. So currently in Capricorn, there's 4 major players. Pholus is also there. Quaoar is also there. We'll leave them out. In the spirit of astrology, fuck the minor planets. Who needs them? We'll come back to them another time. I love the minor planets. I am being silly. Okay, so Jupiter, very large player, largest planet, the boss of the solar system, as Mike Brown said to me in an email one day. Jupiter bosses around the whole solar system because apart from the sun, which pretty much stays put at the center, Jupiter, as an orbiting body, has the most gravity and the most influence. That is followed by a close second by Saturn, the second largest planet, about 900 times the size of the Earth. Jupiter is about 1,200 times the size of the Earth. Combine these two, you get something about 2,100 times the size of the Earth and something like 800 times the mass of the Earth. That's not exact, but approximate. And in the mix is Pluto. So the first conjunction of the year was Saturn-Pluto. That was in January, the day that China emailed out the fake PCR codes. The final conjunction of the year will be Jupiter conjunct Saturn in the first degree of Aquarius. We're not there yet, but I've got it there to remind us of what's coming in the future. In between, in April, June, and November, Jupiter, the largest planet, made a series of conjunctions to Pluto, the smallest planet, and the most distant of what we consider a planet. Eris, of course, is about the exact same size as Pluto and way, 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 way further out. From where I'm sitting, I would imagine that if you had to use a relative scale, and the moon was across the street, that Eris would be out in Oneonta somewhere. It would be like halfway across the state. That's how far it is. It's the furthest planet regularly considered the coldest, and all that. It's a very interesting thing. And it, by the way, is in Aries. I will pay a little homage to Eris in a moment, but let's stick with this conjunction. So, conjunction here at the beginning of the year, a little bit further back. This conjunction at the end of the year, and then Jupiter, Pluto 3 times. Now, I have in the past taken a very positive view of Jupiter, Pluto, based on something I read in a book. Let's see if I've even got a copy of it handy. My books tend to float between here and an office that's downstairs. I don't see one, but it's in the book Astrology, A Cosmic Science by Isabel Hickey. And she wrote what I believe is the first thing ever written in English, except for Aleister Crowley. A couple of people were onto Pluto early on. So Crowley was definitely first. And Hickey came out with a pamphlet about Pluto. I would estimate sometime around like maybe 1974, 78, sometime in there. And she said that she described the conjunction of Jupiter and Pluto as the golden thread that links all spiritual traditions. I happen to like that idea a lot. One of my yoga teachers, a man named JJH, was fond of saying that in the world of spiritual traditions, there are many shores that surround one lake. And so I've always thought as Jupiter Pluto as the, as Isabel Hickey's golden thread, or the many shores that surround one lake. And the lake is God, and the shores are the religious and spiritual traditions. Okay, so there's another way to look at this, though, because Pluto in the sign of Capricorn has been rather destructive all these years and caused all kinds of huge problems, basically demolishing the world as we know it. We'll know in 100 years whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, but for now, the demolition continues. And Pluto is also a kind of a representative of death. So Pluto is depicted in mythology as wearing the helmet of invisibility, and he was the guy who would kidnap people to the underworld, and nobody could see him coming, and he wasn't the lord of the underworld so much as the kind of its representative. Orcus in Roman mythology was the lord of the underworld. Currently, Orcus, not very well acknowledged planet, similar to Pluto, is in Virgo. In any event, Pluto has this dual role. On the one hand, it has this Shiva-like role of destroying everything in its path. And it has another role of spiritualizing. Almost everyone who follows astrology at this time is familiar with the work of Geoffrey Wolfe Green. And it was Geoffrey Green in the early 1980s who came out with the first proper book about Pluto in English, called Pluto, Evolutionary Journey of the Soul. And it was proposed by Hickey, that Pluto could be a spiritualizing influence. It was recognized by Crowley that Pluto could be a spiritualizing influence, an influence that brings us closer to ourselves and closer to our souls. But it was Jeff Green who said, well, this is what I'm saying is the main thing that Pluto is about. So people are familiar with this. But the other side is this death obsession, and this destructiveness of Pluto. And it appears as if the peaks in what is being called a pandemic have occurred concurrent with the Jupiter-Pluto conjunctions. Again, in April, rough time, June, rough time, and now November, another rough time. So that will fortunately be over. Mars will station direct, and a lot of the astrology that is holding the world situation in its pattern is going to dissipate and dissolve rather quickly. And then by mid-November, Jupiter enters Aquarius, Saturn enters Aquarius, and then really incredibly, they form a conjunction in the first degree of Aquarius on the winter solstice. That's all amazing. That it's Jupiter and Saturn, that it's Saturn and Aquarius, Jupiter and Aquarius is pretty fantastic. And then that they form their 20-year conjunction just once on the winter solstice is, like, I think, incredible. This is an opportunity. Right now, the world is balanced on the precipice of global tyranny, basically, all on the excuse of a thing that is said to be exactly as deadly as the flu, and now suddenly there's no cases of the flu. What exactly happened? We'll come back to that in half a moment. We are just socially and politically balanced on this precipice, and we must make note of this. We must pay attention to this. We cannot just take for granted that we've been pushed into this vulnerable situation and then pretend that its life is normal and all these people who are doing this are so trustworthy. I'm sorry. I'm not an especially cynical person. I am a realistic person. I am someone who is capable of learning. I'm also capable of having an open mind and, recognizing that people have the ability to change. I just don't see too much changing going on in the form of these corporate and government leaders who are always chasing the next market. They're always chasing the next frontier, and it would appear that the next market, the next frontier in this corporate expansion is the human body, which now must be injected with all kinds of things to stay healthy. You know what you need to do to stay healthy as a human being? Not very much at all. You need to pretty much drink water, eat pretty good food, get some rest and stay modestly happy. And the chances are that unless you have some very unusual toxins in your environment, most of which can be avoided or cut down, you will remain healthy for most of your life. If you have genetically inherited problems, if you live near a waste incinerator, if you drink from a poisoned well, if your dietary habits are very bad, that's not going to work out so well. But a lot of those things can be remedied. You do not need to be injected with things to be healthy. You do not need to be medicated with things to be healthy. And no headache was ever caused by a lack of aspirin. Okay, so one last little reference to the healing theme that I have just brought up. Mars is stationing direct in Aries. It is not alone in doing so. Mars is stationing direct in Aries in a square aspect to all of these planets in Capricorn. Let me draw that in for you so that we all feel better. I'm going to use blue for the square instead of red. Mars is not exactly square, all of these planets, but it's very close to a square to them. But the important thing is that as Mars stations direct, the squares are going to perfect among all of these planets. So it will be, at some point in the next month or two or so, it'll be Mars square Pallas, Mars square Pluto, Mars square Jupiter, Mars square Saturn, all at once. So Mars is very much in an active and dynamic process. And so the Mars retrograde is not really over until Mars enters Taurus. But when Mars enters Taurus, it will make a conjunction to Uranus in Taurus on the day of the presidential inauguration. So there are some chapters of this whole story of Mars retrograde that are left to unfold. However, this is all happening in the sign Aries. And one of the things influencing the sign Aries is Chiron in Aries. And so Chiron in Aries is really saying, wake up, pay attention, and thread the needle of who you are. Fully embrace your need for healing. Fully embrace your healing crisis. Healing always comes with a little crisis. Sometimes it comes with a huge crisis. Sometimes it will come with a little modest crisis. Chiron, homeopathy, and most schools of holistic medicine that are not designed to poison people, which creates its own healing crisis, right? That's like, side effects. Well, in holistic medicine, when the thing that's making us sick is sweat out of our body or in some way processed, it will come with a healing crisis. With Chiron and Aries, part of that healing crisis is a crisis of identity. And I would suggest that Chiron is saying identity is one thing, but who you are is a more important thing. And who you are is more than who and what you say you are. Who you are is something deeply inherent in your being. And Chiron's inconvenient action and Chiron's inconvenient process is suggesting that we embrace the challenge of figuring out who we are. Okay, one last point. Eris remains in late Aries, and the thing that we're going to be left with at the end of all of this Jupiter and Saturn in Capricorn and Pluto in Capricorn is this. I've drawn it in purple, maybe a little hard to see. The square of Pluto and Eris. The square of Pluto and Eris is going to go on for a couple of years, and it's like the last remnant of this very powerful dynamic between Capricorn and Aries. I've written more about this tonight. Check on the homepage of planetwaves.net. For tonight's article and tonight's horoscope. Please subscribe. You notice we don't have any ads on Planet Waves. We do a lot of things. We do all kinds of fun things. There's no ads. We're supported entirely by your subscriptions and memberships, and also by your product purchases. If you like the way that I present ideas, you will love my readings, which are in audio, video, and written. Okay, let's take a couple of minutes for a science report. I wrote a new article on Thursday I was planning to write a 900-page editorial. The editors met on the Planet Waves editors, a small group of us who control the content of the publication, and collaborate on my content. Met, and I said, okay, I'm going to do a 900-word piece after the election. I'm going to do became a 4,000-word investigative feature, published the next day. So I have been on this COVID thing since March 3rd full time. I was watching it in February, but then come March 3rd, I decided that Planet Waves was going to be a central source of information from all sources. So COVID-19 news on planetwaves.net. You'll see it up on the top left, published 1,000 times this year. I've written about 30 articles, and I've read a lot of articles, and I'm reading books. I'm now on my third book about virology, and so I've learned a lot this year. And this weekend, I had a pretty tremendous breakthrough. Over the past, through the month of October, a small group of reporters on a list that I'm on, kind of a list of people involved in science and science journalism, have been considering that the CDC, United States Centers for Disease Control, admitted in a document about the COVID test that there are no clinical samples of 2019 nCoV. That is to say, SARS-CoV-2, the virus. The virus that is supposedly out of control and racing through society. I want to say this again. The United States Centers for Disease Control has admitted on its website that it has no samples of the virus. There are no clinical samples. And think about that for a second. They're claiming that 237,000 people have died in the United States alone. They're claiming that 1.25 million have died in the world. But the most powerful infectious disease agency, the United States Centers for Disease Control, the place that everybody takes their advice and their guidance from, does not have a clinical sample. This creates a problem. When you want to test the population for this thing, but you don't have a clinical sample, what do? Well, you use something off the shelf of the gene bank. So what they did was they took another virus that has some genetic sequences in common with coronaviruses. They mixed it with some human tissue. They took a kind of a gene print of it, and then they made some codes that they're using in the polymerase chain reaction machine. You can read about this in the article, How Safe is Too Safe, on the cover of planetwaves.net. Okay, so let me go over this again. The United States Centers for Disease Control is claiming that 237,000 people, as of yesterday, have died of a virus, but they have no clinical samples of the virus. I said that. I'm not saying that myself, though. I'm saying that they're saying that. How is that possible? How do you have 237,000 dead bodies and not have any of the thing that you think or claim killed them? Further, they are claiming that 6% of these people died from COVID only. We know that number from the CDC statistics. 94% had numerous comorbidities: heart disease, cancer, diabetes, obesity, COPD, God knows what else. Average of 2.6, close to 3 other diseases. Every person claimed to have died of COVID had around 3 other major life-threatening diseases. 6% they're saying had COVID only. Well, you would think those 6% would be dripping with the novel coronavirus. You could just take a spoon and scoop a little bit of it, put it in a beaker, take a sip and see what it does. No, they don't have any. They don't have any. And this creates a problem when you're looking for it, because the polymerase chain reaction only looks for what you tell it to look for. So they have no samples of no clinical samples. That's how it's said. None. So they've got to have a test. God knows why. So when they program the test called writing the primers, the test is an artificial intelligence machine called the polymerase chain reaction machine. You prime the test with a little piece of the virus that you think you're looking for. Where does it come from? It comes off the shelf of the gene bank. It is stock virus. Doesn't exist in nature. Neither does SARS-CoV-2 exist in nature, or they would have some. Just saying. Just saying. Okay, I mean, I've watched enough like true crime shows to know that if you claim somebody was shot, you might want to have bullets, sound of gunfire, shell casings, a weapon. Somebody heard the gunshots, might want to have holes in the person's body. No, they don't have any of that. They're saying that you've got 1.25 million dead people from a virus that they don't have. Okay, so then they take some stock virus off the shelf and they put it in the polymerase chain reaction. Then they take bazillions of samples of people in the population and they run those samples through the polymerase chain reaction and they match them not to the real virus they claim exists. They match them to this stock virus off the fucking shelf. And if you match that, you're said to be SARS positive, just COVID positive. But you can't be, because SARS-CoV-2 has never been found in nature, and the thing that they're looking for doesn't really exist as a virus. It's just some computer code shoved into the machine. So what are they finding? They're finding all this random nucleotides, and they're running the machines at 40 to 45 cycles. Talk about hitting the broadside of a barn. Fauci himself admits that when you run the test past 35 cycles, you really have no true positives. New York Times article I've linked to many times. The people quoted in the article are incredulous that running this test at 40 cycles, remember each cycle doubles the amount, gives you no true positives. But they're running tests at 40 to 45 cycles. I compare this in my article, if you think that that's relevant. So then imagine like turning up the static on your amplifier, and you put a microphone in front of it. You got all this noise, and then you turn up the public address system so loud that it shakes the windows, and then you expect to hear Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, just randomly. That's what this test is the equivalent of. So they've never found SARS-CoV-2. They do not have any clinical samples. So when they're looking for this thing they've never found, they of course have to use something else. And then when they find that something else, it can't be SARS-CoV-2 because they've never found it. I am not asserting this myself. I am telling you what I have figured out from reading a CDC document that basically explains this, and many, many, many other sources of having spent much of the year understanding the polymerase chain reaction. The test, it's not really a test. It doesn't prove infection. It doesn't, the documentation says that the results of this test do not prove infection, disease, infectiousness, sickness, anything. All it proves is you've got some dead nucleotides floating around that could be from anything. Could be from flu shot 2 years ago. Could be from God knows what other shot you may have taken. There's always excess viruses stuck in there. It could be healthy RNA. It could be from the cold you had last month. It could be an exosome reaction. Maybe you're having a reaction to something in your environment and your body is putting out what looked like virus but is really a cleansing. Could be anything. But we know two things. That SARS-CoV-2 has never been proven to exist because no one has any. It's that simple. I'm not a particularly conspiratorial person. I'm actually pretty non-judgmental, I think, in most ways. And though I am curious, you see, that's my thing. And I will always go where the evidence leads, and I'm not just looking at one side of the story. I have talked to people on every side of the story. I have read on every side of the story, and my colleagues and I have hashed this out, and we are committed to getting to the bottom of it. And so that's my report of what I learned this weekend doing my science homework and writing stuff for you to read. Okay, I'm planning later on Tuesday to have another video introducing the annual editions. If you're on the Planet Waves list, we are introducing the Planet Waves annual editions tonight. One is called All of Us Here. That's about Aquarius. And another one is called An Aquarian Era. All of Us Here is a recorded reading. I will sit right here and speak to you. I'll do a couple of videos also to show you the charts. That covers 2021 only, and then the written reading, An Aquarian Era, covers out to 2024 till the ingress of Pluto into Aquarius. That deserves its own video. As ever, great fun speaking with you. Thanks for watching. Please share, click like, and subscribe to my channel so I get a little love out of the YouTube Google bot of Alphabet Incorporated. Love you. Thanks for watching. Thank you, Kate, for making this presentation. If you're listening on Facebook, there's only one channel of audio. We'll fix that on YouTube. Bye for now.